Hey guys, Sal with S&P. Today we're going to install a Eurovan style cable clutch conversion in a Mark 1. Same principle will apply for a Mark 2. This is only for O2A and O2J transmissions. This is not something that's going to work on your O2O. If you have a stock transmission, you don't need this. But if you've installed a VR6 or a TDI or a 18T, or you just want a O2A or O2J on your ABA swap, you're going to need this or a hydraulic conversion to control your clutch, because the O2A and O2J were normally hydraulically controlled. So we provide a little kit. I want to show you how I normally install them. Might help you with just some issues you might run across. But so we'll start with the cable. Cable is custom made. We have Mark 1 ends put on it, so it's made for your Mark 1 pedal. The other end is made for this actuator. This is your actuator. Like I said, it normally came on a Eurovan T3. It bolts in right in place of your slave cylinder. So if you have your old slave cylinder hardware, you can reuse it. If you don't happen to have it, you need something about 30 to 35 millimeters long. It's an M8 by 1.25 thread. Allen's, hex heads, whatever you prefer. I find the Allens are a little easier to install. They're just it's a little tight on the inside of this space in here, but you can still get a 13 millimeter hex head in there and the socket, no problem. The bracket, this is the cable tab bracket that we provide. It's going to mount to the side of your transmission. I'll show you that in the car a little later. And this piece is a delete plug that you really only need if you're running an O2J tower, even if it's on your O2A transmission. But the O2J tower has the reverse switch right where we need the cable to go through. They can't occupy the same space, so we have a delete plug. If you want to keep your reverse lights, a simple switch underneath the dash is something that a lot of times that I do. It's kind of easy to hide, and that way you can turn them on and off, still have them if you need them for either state inspection or you just like to have reverse lights like a lot of people do. So let's kind of get our parts. Our parts are here. I'm going to show you a couple things in the car. One thing that I definitely recommend is lubricating your cable before you put it in the car. At least give it a few minutes. So you'll unwrap this guy, and from this direction, I like to take some of this dry lubricant. Anything with graphite is great, but that's just going to keep it from getting sticky later on. And we just want to make sure we get enough in there that it's going to run all the way down. It's now dripping out the other end, so we've got it the whole way. A lot of people don't end up lubricating their cables, and that's part of the reason you get a heavy pedal feel. Our cables are actually shielded, so they do slide a little better naturally, but some lubrication is always helpful. The other thing we're going to look at is your pedal condition itself. If it's got a lot of side-to-side slop, the bushings could be bad in it. That's going to make a bind. All of these things will really create drag on your pedal, and it's going to feel like you have a really heavy clutch. But if all of these components are working like they're supposed to, all of your components in your car are working like you're supposed to, it's actually a really nice clutch feel. Alright guys, so you can see that we've got our cable tab mounted to our transmission mount. So in a Mark 1 you would have done this preferably before you installed the transmission in the car, but it's still possible if you're doing this afterwards. And then right behind it you can see our delete plug that's mounted in our tower. So the next thing that's got to happen is we want to install our cable into our old cable clutch hole, and we want to connect it to the Mark 1 pedal first. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and I don't have enough hands or enough camera stays to show you me putting it in there, but you'll get the idea. I found it kind of hard to show you this in the car. Just not a good way to get a camera in there and lighting in there and everything else. So this is a Mk1 pedal cluster. Yours may be slightly different. I believe this is actually out of a later cabriolet, but what you have, this is what's mounted to your firewall. So when I was talking about side to side play, we're looking at this pedal going this direction. These bushings are in pretty good shape. This thing moves freely. No issues there. One thing I have seen is this is the tube that goes through the firewall. If you put this parallel, you know, this is sitting 90 degrees to the ground. You can see this tube is bent down a little bit. It's not as bad as some that I've seen, but this tube right here is a lot of time what likes to bend and break off. This one has a pretty good weld around it. Some of them only have a little spot weld. If you've got one that's broken or twisted, I definitely recommend making a little gusset that goes back from here to here. And then also make sure that that tube is actually fully welded, not just spot welded in a couple places. This tube, like I said, again, really the face of it should be pretty parallel with your firewall mounting. You can also kind of sight across here, and you can see that this tube is turned down just a little bit, so it's had a little strain, but honestly not the end of the world. Okay, so we have the cable inside the car. I find it easier if the pedal is pushed all the way forward, and then I'm able to slide the cable out and over this tab right here. Your bulkhead for the rain tray is real close. So with it pushed all the way forward, we can slide the tab over and then let it back out, make sure that it's fully seated in there. But anyway, that's the way I find it a little easier to do. So cable's inside the car, hook to our pedal. There's a couple ways you can route this. If you have a battery and you have this wiring that's already going this way, I suggest doing it this way. It's a little bit less of a bend and a little bit less of a strain out of on the cable itself, so you get less drag. If you have a shaved bay or you just don't want to see that cable, I have run them before down around this booster and straight down behind the transmission, between the transmission and the axle, come underneath the transmission and then loop up from the starter here and then put it into place. Both will work well, but I find this way it seems to work a little better. It's definitely a slower and more controlled bend, I think, anyway. So we got to feed this cable into place, and we need this grommet right here to get into our bracket. So to do that, we're gonna take our little dust boot off and slide this cable kind of up through the available space. On an O2A, this is not nearly as complicated. There's a little more room to operate. So now my cable is inside the bracket, my dust boot is on this side. Now I have to get my grommet into place. So a little bit of leftover installation grease from the motor install won't hurt. Get that grommet to slide into place, maybe, possibly. There it goes. Okay, once it's in place, push the tube through, reconnect our dust boot, and then, oh no, my cable's too short. Well, not really. We want to make sure we have maximum adjustment in this thing, plus you may still have some slack on the pedal, got a little bit of rubber to compress, all those kind of things. So 7/8 or a 22 millimeter wrench, and set that thing right there, and just a little pull, you don't need much, and this thing will slip around this end and into place. And we are pretty much backed all the way up. I've got just a little bit of slop. I'm going to give it a couple little pushes, and that's going to make sure that everything's seated into place, and then you can check your tension again. So that pedal feels great. We've got just a little bit of slop there, which is just right. You don't want that thing to be riding the edge of the clutch. You'll be getting a little bit of slippage if that happens. You may need to adjust and tension this after, a few 100 miles or something like that. Cables do stretch, but otherwise it should be in, pretty close. So, like I said, you definitely don't want this to be so tight that it's pulling on this bracket, but you also don't need it to be loose and flopping around either. That's just going to take away your clutch throw. So, that's pretty much the long and the short of it. That pedal feels really nice in this car, but it had fresh bushings, and we just greased that cable. Everything's fresh and new, so it should feel nice. We actually do have a stage 2 South bend in this, so but it's not a heavy pedal at all. I'd say it's no worse than a stage 2 in an 020. So that's our cable install. It probably should take you 25-30 minutes, including installing your actuator and everything else if you're kind of ready to go. So if you got any questions about it, definitely feel free to shoot me a message.